Welcome back to the deep dive. So we're living with these screens, right? Glued to our phones, sometimes for hours every single day. You know that feeling, that nagging headache maybe? Or trying to sleep but your eyes still feel, I don't know, buzzy. It feels like more than just being tired from looking at a screen, doesn't it? Today we're really diving into what that constant glow is actually doing to our eyes. And, how the phones themselves might be part of a growing health thing. Okay, let's unpack this because it feels like it goes way deeper than just, oh, my eyes are tired.
You've really hit on something major there. What you're describing, it's a widespread issue. We call it digital eye strain, or DES. It's directly tied to spending a lot of time in front of screens. And the symptoms, well, they're probably familiar: blurred vision, headaches that keep coming back, actual eye pain, just general fatigue in your eyes. But it's not just about discomfort. There's a deeper physiological impact. Specifically, the blue light from these screens, it can actually mess with your body's natural clock, your circadian rhythm. Well, it suppresses melatonin. That's the hormone you need to regulate sleep. So yeah, it can lead to real trouble falling asleep, maybe worse sleep quality overall. And what's really important is that some groups seem to be more affected: kids, pregnant women. So it's not just annoying, it's leaning into like a public health and accessibility issue.
Okay, DES, digital eye strain. And you mentioned it comes down to how the displays manage brightness. So today, we're taking that deep dive into display dimming, trying to figure out how manufacturers are or maybe aren't really thinking about our eye comfort. And like always, this is built from a whole stack of your sources: tech articles, research papers, the works. We're digging for those key nuggets. All right, so this is where it gets really interesting, I think. These symptoms, they seem to link back to how phones dim their screens. And you said there are two main ways they do this: pulse width modulation, PWM, and direct current, or DC dimming.
Exactly. That's the core of it. PWM basically flashes the screen's light source, or pixels, in OLEDs on and off really, really fast. Super high frequency, measured in hertz. How bright you perceive it depends on the duty cycle. That's just the percentage of time the light is actually on in each cycle.
Okay, flashing on and off.
Right. And it has advantages, especially for OLEDs. You get really good color accuracy. Even when it's dim, colors stay consistent. It's also pretty energy efficient usually, and simple to control digitally.
Okay, good color saves power. Sounds good. But if it's flashing, doesn't that cause the problems we were just talking about? The headaches, the eye strain. Why use it if DC dimming is an option?
Oh, well, that's the big trade-off. It's a major engineering decision. That rapid on-off cycle, especially if the frequency isn't high enough, creates flicker. Now, for some people, maybe people more sensitive to it, this flicker can trigger headaches, definitely eye strain, blurred vision. Some people even report migraines.
Wow, migraines.
Yeah. And it often feels worse when the screen is dimmer because the off part of the cycle gets longer relative to the on part. And here's a key thing. Even when the screen is dimmed way down using PWM, the light that is emitted during that on phase, it's always at peak intensity.
Always peak brightness, just for shorter bursts.
Exactly. So that constant exposure to peak light, even in short bursts, might worsen the negative effects, could still disrupt sleep. So choosing PWM often means prioritizing that color accuracy and maybe power efficiency over having a completely flicker-free experience. Now, DC dimming, sometimes called constant current reduction, it's totally different. It adjusts brightness by changing the amount of electrical current or voltage going to the LEDs. More current, brighter screen. Less current, dimmer screen. Simple as that, really.
Okay, so it's just like a dimmer switch on a light bulb.
Kind of, yeah. A more sophisticated version. And the huge advantage is it's flicker-free, no rapid on-off cycling. So for people sensitive to PWM flicker, DC dimming can be a massive relief. Really cuts down on eye strain.
But there's a catch, I assume.
There's always a catch, isn't there? With DC dimming, especially at low brightness levels, you can sometimes see color shifts. Like grays might look a bit greenish. Color rendering might not be quite as precise overall, brightness changes might not feel as smooth, and sometimes, depending on how it's done, it might use a bit more power. You might even notice a kind of grainy pattern, or what's called the mirror effect, in very dark colors on some displays.
So yeah, it really is a classic engineering trade-off then. You want perfect color and maybe better battery life.
Yeah.
You lean towards PWM, but risk flicker. You want flicker-free comfort. DC dimming is great, but you might lose a bit on the color accuracy or smoothness side.
That's the dilemma in a nutshell. And it directly affects your experience using the phone every day. And if we dig into the science of flicker a bit more, there's a clear link between the PWM frequency and how much stress it puts on your eyes and brain. Lower frequencies generally mean more stress. Your eye has something called the flicker fusion threshold that's around 80 hertz, maybe a bit higher for somewhere flashes start to look like steady light.
Right, like old fluorescent bulbs sometimes.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Your brain can apparently react to flicker at much higher frequencies, maybe up to 400 hertz or even more.
So even if I don't consciously see it flashing, my brain might still be registering it.
Precisely. It might still be causing subconscious stress or fatigue. So how do we measure this risk? Well, there's a standard, the IE 1789 standard, which gives us a flicker risk chart. It's a really useful benchmark. It lays out thresholds. For example, it says a 480 hertz PWM display, like say the iPhone 15 Pro, is actually considered high risk for negative effects if the modulation is above 40%.
480 hertz is high risk. Wow.
Above a certain modulation, yeah. And a 240 hertz display, like the older Pixel 7, that's rated high risk above just 20% modulation. To get a no-risk classification according to this standard, you need frequencies way up there above 3,000 hertz.
3,000 hertz.
Yeah. Which, clearly shows that many popular phones today aren't really meeting that no-risk bar. And it gets even more nuanced. It's not just the frequency, the hertz number, it's also about modulation depth. That's basically how big the difference is between the on brightness and the off brightness in each pulse.
Okay, so how much it's actually dimming in each flash.
Sort of, yeah. You could have a really high frequency, but if the modulation depth is tiny, it might feel almost flicker-free. But a lower frequency with a high modulation depth, that could still cause significant strain. So flicker-free isn't just about hitting a high hertz number. And there's probably a point of diminishing returns too. Going from, say, 2,000 hertz to 4,000 hertz might not give you as much perceptible benefit as going from 240 hertz to, like, 1,000 or 2,000 hertz.
So just chasing the absolute highest number isn't the whole story.
Probably not. It's more complex than that.
Okay, we've got the science, the tech trade-offs. Let's bring it back to Google. What does this all mean for the Pixel phones? How have they handled this historically, and what's coming up?
Right, Google. Well, historically, their approach has been, let's say, conservative on this front. Models like the Pixel 7 used a 240 hertz PWM frequency, which, as we just discussed, based on IE 1789, falls pretty squarely into that higher risk zone, especially at lower brightness. And that low frequency is a known trigger for discomfort headaches, eye strain for flicker-sensitive folks. Google hasn't really given an official reason for sticking with 240 hertz for so long.
So it seems like maybe it wasn't a top priority.
It suggests it wasn't, yeah, which makes their upcoming move feel more like catching up than leading the way. Now, the rumors for the Pixel 10 Pro and the 10 Pro XL, they point to an increase, moving from that 240 hertz up to 480 hertz PWM.
Okay, double the frequency. That sounds like an improvement.
It is, definitely. For people bothered by the 240 hertz flicker, 480 hertz should offer some relief. But it's worth noting, this upgrade seems to be only for the Pro models, not the base Pixel 10, not the Fold, apparently.
Interesting.
And these Pro models are also expected to get other fancy display stuff, LTPO OLEDs with 120 hertz adaptive refresh rates, maybe 3,000 nits peak brightness. Making 480 hertz a Pro-only feature might suggest they see eye comfort as, well, a premium feature. Or maybe it's just about component costs or integration challenges. But here's the key assessment. While going from 240 hertz to 480 hertz is better, it still puts Google behind quite a few competitors. And remember that IE standard, 480 hertz is still classified as high risk, above 40% modulation.
So still not in that no-risk zone.
Not even close, according to that standard. So it's a step, yes. It might help people who are really suffering with the 240 hertz, but it doesn't reach that ideal no-risk level, and it doesn't really put them on par with the brands pushing much higher frequencies. It feels like playing catch-up, mostly with Apple and Samsung, rather than innovating here.
That makes sense. Okay, so if Google's playing catch-up, who is out front? Who's leading the charge on eye-friendly displays? What's the rest of the market look like?
Yeah, the competitive scene is actually really interesting here. You see a clear split. The ones really pushing the boundaries with super high-frequency PWM or clever hybrid systems, they're mostly Chinese manufacturers. Honor is a big name here. The Honor Magic 7 Pro, for instance, boasts an incredible 400 and 320 hertz PWM. They market it as zero-risk dimming, and it's got 2 Rhineland flicker-free certification.
4,300 hertz, wow.
Right. And their earlier Honor 90 had 3,840 hertz PWM, also marketed heavily for eye safety. Then you've got OnePlus. The OnePlus 13 is expected to have 2160 hertz PWM. And some OnePlus phones use a hybrid approach. They use something like DC dimming when the screen is bright, say above 30%, then switch to high-frequency PWM, maybe 2160 hertz when it gets dimmer, like below 25%.
Trying to get the best of both worlds.
Kind of, yeah. And users have actually reported that the DC dimming part does seem to help relieve that head pressure feeling for some. Xiaomi is another one. The Xiaomi 14 Ultra has a dual strategy. DC dimming at high brightness, then 1920 Hz PWM at low brightness. It also has 2 certifications for eye protection. The upcoming 15 Ultra is also expected around 1920 Hz. Now, contrast that with the big Western brands. Samsung's Galaxy S25 Ultra reportedly sticking with 480 Hz PWM. Interestingly, there's talk its dual pulse rate might actually be less comfortable for some than the S24 Ultra's consistent 480 Hz, but we'll see.
Huh, weird.
And Apple. Their flagships, like the iPhone 14 Pro Max, iPhone 15 Pro, also use 480 Hz PWM, which again falls into that high-risk category above 40% modulation based on IE 1789.
So a real difference in strategy.
A very clear divergence. You have Chinese brands really going after ultra-high PWM and hybrid solutions, while the major Western players seem content for now around that 480 Hz mark. Different priorities, maybe different R&D focus.
Okay, but you mentioned it's not just about the dimming tech, right? Flicker frequency is one thing, but true eye comfort must be more holistic. What else are these leading companies doing?
Absolutely crucial point. It's a whole package. PWM frequency is important, but leaders are integrating a suite of features. Adaptive color temperature is a big one. Phones from OPPO, Samsung's Eye Comfort Shield, they adjust the screen's color warmth to match the light around you. Less harsh contrast. Honor does something similar, simulating natural light changes.
Right, like True Tone on iPhones.
Similar concept, yes. Then there's blue light filtering. Most phones have a night mode or eye comfort toggle that warms the screen color to reduce blue light, especially at night, because of that melatonin link we talked about. But some are getting more advanced, like Honor's natural light simulation, trying to mimic the dynamic shifts of daylight. They even talk about rhythmic light technology for eye blood circulation. Not sure about the science there, but they're trying things. And dedicated modes, too. Honor has a sleep aid display that specifically adjusts color based on melatonin cycles, and things like an ebook mode, pure black and white for easier reading. And finally, those third-party certifications are becoming a bigger deal, like the Tuvri Rhineland flicker-free one. It gives consumers some independent validation that the display meets certain eye comfort standards. Builds trust. So when you compare Google's rumored focus just on hitting 480 Hz for the Pixel 10 Pro XL, it looks pretty limited next to these comprehensive natural light display solutions and multiple certifications that brands like Honor are pushing. So yeah, putting it all together, Google's position seems reactive. Boosting to 480 Hz is an improvement over 240 Hz, sure. It brings them level with Apple and Samsung. But they're still quite far behind what Honor, Xiaomi, OnePlus are doing with much higher frequencies or hybrid dimming. And crucially, they seem to be missing that broader suite of eye comfort features, the adaptive color, the natural light stuff, the certifications that competitors are using to differentiate. This creates a real competitive gap, especially as people become more aware of digital eye strain. It feels like a vulnerability.
Okay, but Google's strength is AI and software, right? Doesn't that give them a huge opportunity here? It feels like they could do something really smart and different in this area of, user well-being.
Absolutely. That's the potential unlock for Google. They could leverage AI and their software expertise brilliantly here. Imagine AI learning your personal sensitivity to flicker, or adjusting dimming dynamically based on the room lighting and the content on screen, or maybe integrating display settings deeply with your sleep tracking data. There's huge potential. So what should they do? Recommendations. Well, first, they really need to aim higher on PWM. Get beyond 480 Hz. Target 1000 Hz plus, maybe even over 2000 Hz to get into that safer territory and compete properly. Second, implement smart hybrid dimming. Use DC dimming when it makes sense, brighter conditions, and high-frequency PWM when needed, lower brightness, finding that balance. Third, maybe look into advanced waveform shaping. Work with display driver makers to make the PWM pulses smoother, less harsh, even at lower frequencies.
Smoother pulses.
Fourth, build that holistic eye comfort suite. Use AI for truly adaptive color temp. Go beyond basic blue light filtering. Maybe create circadian-aware display modes. Fifth, get certified. Seek out those 2 Rhineland or similar certifications and actually market them. Build that trust. Sixth, make eye comfort a core pillar. Talk about it alongside the camera and AI. Make it a selling point. Seventh, collaborate deeply with Samsung Display or whoever makes their panels. Push them for better dimming solutions at the source. Eighth, don't just put the stuff in the Pro models. Standardize good eye comfort features across the whole Pixel lineup. Make it baseline.
That makes sense. Accessibility for everyone.
Exactly. Ninth, educate users. Be proactive. Explain PWM. Explain blue light. Explain what the phone is doing to help. Become a trusted source. And finally, maybe a longer-term vision. Invest in R&D for genuinely flicker-free OLEDs that don't compromise color. That's the holy grail, maybe.
Right. It's really clear that eye comfort isn't just some nice-to-have feature anymore. It's becoming critical. A differentiator in a crowded market, sure, but also just fundamental for our health, our well-being. Google moving to 480 hertz. Yeah, it's necessary, but like we've said, it feels reactive. They're still trailing the leaders in this specific area.
Yeah, the future here isn't just brighter screens or faster refresh rates. It's got to be about a whole approach to making these displays healthier to use for hours on end. Google is a huge player. They absolutely have the capability and maybe even the responsibility to lead this shift. But right now, their current path looks more like following than pioneering.
So lots to think about there. What does this all mean for you listening right now? Which part of digital eye strain hits you the hardest day to day? And looking ahead, what do you think phone makers really need to focus on next to give us genuinely healthier screens? Something to chew on until our next deep dive.